Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Welcome to my video on APA style punctuation as described in the publication manual of the American Psychological Association. This video will be primarily looking at punctuation, but I'll also take a look at some other areas of APA style mechanics toward the end. So let's begin by looking at spacing. You want to insert one space after periods at the end of a complete sentence. Now, it may be that you have seen manuscripts or been taught that there's two spaces after the period at the end of a complete sentence, but that's only for draft manuscripts, and we rarely see that anymore, the use of two spaces. The use of one space after a complete sentence is acceptable. Insert one space after periods that divide parts of a reference. So this would be like in your reference section. The author, the year, the title of the journal article, all separated by a period, of course, and there'd be a space after that. Insert one space after periods that are used after the initials in a name. So the example I have here, it's T period space, L period space, Grande. And insert one space after commas, colons, and semicolons. Also use one space between the variables, mathematical symbols, and values for statistics used in text. In the example I have here, you see that the p-value, or the variable p, is separated by one space from the greater than symbol, which is separated by one space from the actual value of 0.05. This is another area that's often confused, and I see a lot of expressions, statistical expressions, that seem very crammed together because there's no spacing. So you do want to have proper spacing inside those statistical examples. Do not use a space after a colon used in a ratio, or a colon that appears after a DOI number in a reference. And you also do not want to use a space after an internal period in an abbreviation. So a common abbreviation we see in APA style is IE, which means that is. So it'd be I period, E period. There'd be no spacing there between I period and the E. So here we're to take a look at the use of a period. So you want to use a period in Latin abbreviations, like e.g., as I talked about before, IE. So e.g. is for example, and IE is that is. And you want to use a period in reference abbreviations. You see I have an example there, 4th edition, and after P, which stands for page, when it's not italicized, page 108. Do not use a period in acronyms and capital letter abbreviations. For example, ACA, KCREP, IRB, or PTSD. Do not use a period after a web address, neither in text nor in a reference. Do not use a period in the name of a state. And the examples here of Delaware and Arizona. And do not use a period in measurement abbreviations, such as kilograms, feet, centimeters, or pounds. So now let's take a look at comma usage. You want to use a comma to separate elements listed in a series of 3 or more. And I have an example of this coming up a little later in the video. You want to use a comma before a non-restrictive clause. So this is a clause that adds value to the sentence, but if the clause would be removed, it wouldn't change the meaning of the sentence greatly. It's non-essential. And it wouldn't affect the grammatical correctness of the sentence. you want to use a comma in an exact date. So example I have here, February 15th, comma, then a space, 1972, comma, was the date. Do not use a comma before a restrictive clause. So this is a clause where if it was removed, it would change the meaning of the sentence. So you do not want to use a comma before a restrictive clause. And also, you do not want to use a comma to separate components of measurement. For example, 6 years, 4 months, and 12 pounds, 5 ounces. Moving on to semicolons. Use a semicolon to separate elements in a series if one or more of the elements contain a comma. So take a look at this example. The list included A, depression, semicolon, B, personality disorders, semicolon, and C, mild, comma, moderate, comma, and severe substance use. So you'll remember earlier in the video, I said in a list like this to use commas to separate the elements in a list. But if you use commas inside one of the elements, as was the case right here, then you switch to semicolons to separate the elements. Use a colon between a publisher's location and name in the reference section. For example, New York, comma, New York, colon, space, Pearson. So let's take a look at the dash. A dash is used to mark an abrupt interruption in continuity. And although it is, or it can be used correctly, in general we avoid using dashes. If you have a sentence and you're looking at it and you feel it's appropriate to have an abrupt interruption in the continuity and you have to use a dash, work a little harder to see if there's another way to rewrite that sentence, because usually there is. Now moving on to quotation marks. We use quotation marks the first time an invented expression, a coined phrase, slang, or an ironic comment is used. For example, the quote, increased motivation group. Use quotation marks around the name of an article if that name is used in the text. So the example I have here, Grande et al.'s, and notice that is possessive there, 2012, examining mental health symptoms in male and female incarcerated juveniles. Generally, I don't believe it's a good idea to use the full name of an article in the text, although there are certain points in a manuscript where that would be appropriate. But in general, the title is going to appear in the reference section anyway. So if there's any way to avoid using the title in text, I'd recommend that. However, if you do have to use it, remember it's not italicized, it's in quotes. Oftentimes I see that individuals will write that in italics, but it's actually the title of an article, so it would be in quotation marks. Do not use quotation marks for block quotes, and use italics when citing an element as a linguistic example. For example, the correct usage of since and while were reviewed. So let's take a look at parentheses. So we want to use parentheses in parenthetical citations, which makes sense. So in this example, Grande et al., period, comma, space, 2012. That's in parentheses. To declare an abbreviation. So typically, toward the beginning of a manuscript, you're going to want to declare any acronyms, any abbreviations that you're going to use. So in this example, the depression scale, say of a particular instrument, you might want to call that DEP. So that would be in parentheses. To enclose the letter used in a series. What I mean by that is the A, the B, the C. So this is a series, and this is similar again to what I was talking about before. Notice these elements are separated by a comma because there's no comma inside any of the elements. But this letter, which a lot of individuals think it should be 1, 2, or 3, it's actually A, B, or C, it is enclosed in parentheses. Use parentheses to group elements of mathematical expressions. So in this expression we have n minus 1 divided by x squared. Now you might look at this and think that's not a very tidy way to present a mathematical expression, that this would be easier to express if you could use 2 lines and you could have the 2 as superscript, is what we're used to for like x squared. But actually, and that probably would be okay to use this as superscript, but in terms of keeping this as 1 line, that is consistent with APA style. You want to try to avoid using formulas in text. Try to express a mathematical expression or a formula in a single line of text if possible. You don't want to use a multi-line formula in a text or any type of mathematical expression. You also want to use parentheses to enclose statistical values. In this example here, p is less than 0.01. I see this is a common mistake. You do not want to use parentheses back to back. That's a very common mistake actually, and it violates APA style. And you do not want to use parentheses to enclose other content that is already contained in parentheses. If you want to enclose parenthetical content that is already within parentheses in the text and the narrative part of the manuscript, use brackets on the inside, and then as you move outward, use parentheses. It's the opposite for mathematical material that appears in the narrative, in the content of the manuscript. In that case, the brackets are toward the outside and the parentheses are toward the inside. So now let's take a look at some other mechanics issues that I see commonly. Avoid beginning a sentence with a number. If you absolutely must use a number to start a sentence, spell the number out. So 15 instead of 15. Again, I'd strongly recommend try to find another way to express the number in a sentence other than starting the sentence with a number. Also, use italics when inserting the titles of periodicals, books, movies, television shows, and videos. For example, Measurement and Evaluation in Counseling and Development. That's a periodical or a journal. Remember, if you're inserting the title of a particular article contained within a journal, you'd use quotation marks. And finally, do not use italics for Greek letters. They should always appear as standard text. Thank you for watching my video on APA style punctuation. As always, if you have any questions or concerns, feel free to contact me and I'll be happy to assist you.